What's up, everybody? Welcome. We are live on YouTube. It is Sunday night. If you're watching it live, subscribe to this channel, like the video. If you're listening to the podcast, great. Thank you for your support there. I'm Guy. That's John. This is Haberman and MIDDLEKAUFF. We are sponsored by our friends at Tito's Handmade Vodka. Tito's Handmade Vodka. It's Thanksgiving week. I don't know if you're having chicken or turkey or prime rib, but the one thing you got to have at your Thanksgiving dinner, Tito's. Take it with you or have it stocked for the people coming over.
And I think we have to raise our glasses and give a somber cheers to Talanoa Hufanga, who I think tore his ACL. I mean, who's just been, if you're a football fan and you get a guy like that on your team, he just immediately becomes a fan favorite. He's just fucking guys up. You're like, who's this guy? Especially, I mean, I don't know how many people listening or watching this watched a lot of USC in the Clay Helton days. Don't totally blame me if you didn't, but he was sweet there. And he was a polarizing draft pick in the sense of like, where should he go? What position does he play? A lot of my buddies are like, he's too small to play linebacker, but he's not fast enough, but he's just good at football. And it's just one of those where you just benefit. It's not like the Niners weren't even going to take the guy in like the third or fourth round. You take him late, but you immediately know, God, we would have gladly taken this guy in like the second round. You text me right away. I don't know. I was kind of watching two screens and the game was I wasn't as dialed as like, oh, he tore his ACL. And then you just kind of snap out of it. You're like, oh, he tore, and then clearly gets carted off. Then Kyle basically says it sucks. So cheers to Hufanga. Yeah, man, that sucks.
Yeah.
Love that guy.
Tito's toast. I've got to toast, John, to Mike Batesel, Fresno State baseball coach, who's grown out his hair on the front and the back, huge goatee, long flowing blonde, long hair. He's retired. Photos of him yesterday at the Fresno State football game and today at the Aaron Judge jersey retirement. This man delivered a national championship to Fresno State baseball and one of the great sluggers of his era in back-to-back years at Fresno State. That's incredible. Bulldog football team, major disappointment, but the baseball team honored retired Aaron Judge's number. So Tito's toast to Mike Batesel and Aaron Judge.
But in Fresno State fashion, did I send you the video of that? It was sent to me on what the jersey, when the
you did
with the piece of whatever they put over
like
the name to drop.
Off,
the curtain falls off. Just basically like something you'd put on a bed. You just put over which someone just cuts, and then Aaron Judge's name is revealed. Well, they're like 3, 2, 1, and nothing falls. And a guy in the stands had to climb up and yank it down. And then Aaron Judge's name, and he got a standing ovation.
Tito's Handmade Vodka, distilled and bottled in Austin, Texas, 40% alcohol by volume, namely 80 proof, crafted to be savored responsibly. 49ers beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, John, 27-14. Where do you want to start?
I think we have to start with I don't know if you saw I only came into my timeline that Nick Wright, who I actually like, had said that, and even his fellow co-hosts were flummoxed by his take, that if you flip-flop the two, the Niners would win a Super Bowl with Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would suck ass and be drafting high. I think it's pretty clear that if you put Brock Purdy, the guy that we've seen the overwhelming majority of the year, beside a couple drives, right? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are winning that division. They would win 9 games. Like, this version of Brock Purdy is a Pro Bowl player. So it's not as much about the take, but just in general, like, the one bit major difference today is Brock Purdy, the 7th rounder. Now, this guy hasn't been, quote unquote, the number 1 pick in a while, right? He's been traded. He's on a new team for $4 million. So it's like Trey Lance was the number 3 overall pick. Now he's a 3rd string. Like, things change. But like a major difference in that game, because you watch the Bucs, and I've been saying this, like when I watched them early in the season, they're a little older, but like White, Vita Vea, Mike Evans, like they got Wirfs. How many guys would the Niners fucking love to have on their squad? I know one thing they would like to do, have a little redo on the Kinlaw Wirfs decision. Vita Vea, what did who's called? Was it Moose Johnson?
It was Moose, yeah.
But he's like, God, you get Kyle going on Vita Vea, you can't shut up.
Yeah,
and because he's like, God, we were hoping Kinlaw would be like half as good as him, and
right,
didn't quite work out. Or Hargrave, we paid about $40 million. We're hoping something like that. But the point is, like, that team is talented. Like, that team has a lot of good players, and the quarterback is just a roller coaster ride. And Purdy today, I know he had literally the perfect rating game. I don't even know what that means, but he's just a really, really good player. And this is the thing. It shouldn't be that polarizing to talk about Brock Purdy. No one's saying that he's fucking Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady. But relative to the rest of the league, he's really good. I don't know if he's going to be some all-time great star. We got a long way to go. People comparing him to Joe Montana. But this version that we've seen in 2023 is a high-end Pro Bowl guy. Not like the Tyler Huntley, Derek Carr Pro Bowls, where you get in like the 8th guy of your conference. Like a top 3 guy. He could be a top 3 Pro Bowl pick. Him, Dak, and Jalen. And Jared. Jared threw 3 picks today, but
21 to 25 for 333, 3 touchdowns, no picks. So 158.3 quarterback rating. Even he admitted after the game, I'm not sure exactly what goes into that. First time attacking for a Niners quarterback since 89. Same. Montana and Young, the other two, they did it in the same year. That was a good little note from Joe Davis. So I saw the Nick Wright clip as well. Even Chris Broussard was, what'd you say, flustered? Even Broussard was like, I'm a basketball guy, but that's insane.
Well, all 4 guys on the set were looking at him like it was stupid.
Well, part of it is you're comparing him to, like, it's Baker you're talking about, right? You're talking about Baker Mayfield. Put Baker on this team. And Baker,
but you got. I don't know if you know the origin of his take. Like, he's an anti-Purdy. He thinks Purdy stinks. Like, he's been one of the guys that thinks Purdy's very overrated. I listened to Ethan had him on, and like he's one of those. It's one of those things which I never understand in sports. After a while, we all have takes that are dumb, and then things change, and it's like, yeah, this guy's actually better than we thought, or this guy sucks. Who cares? Yeah. I don't get it.
No, but no, you're right. I agree with you. I also think that you never know. Like when you're doing Nick Wright's job, I never quite know who people are reacting to when you say somebody's overrated. Well, which exact take on Brock is he reacting to? Because there are some, I felt like there have been Brock takes over the last several months that are like way too far, right? I remember 5 weeks in, people were saying we shouldn't even have a debate about Brock Purdy anymore. And I said, well, that's crazy. I mean, it's like careers go longer than a season. So yeah, I'm pretty sure we can keep talking about whether he's good or not. And that's fine, or how good he is. I think your point is it's not about whether he's good or not. It's about, well, how good is he? Where's his ceiling? Whatever. But really, when you think about it, the Nick Wright comment was almost a perfect comment to talk about, because he was just talking specifically about how you win a Super Bowl with this team this year. And I think Brock has definitely answered, whatever his career turns out to be, he has without question answered the question, is he a good enough player to be the quarterback of a Super Bowl champion 49er team in 2023? Is he a good enough player to take the Texans to the championship? Irrelevant. Is he a good enough player to win this team a Super Bowl? And the answer, it doesn't mean the answer is yes. He is without a doubt a good enough quarterback to win the Super Bowl with the 2023 San Francisco 49ers. There's no doubt. There is no doubt about it. And I think the thing that's made it complicated is how good his talent is. And that's why around him, that's why the Bucs are interesting, because the Bucs have good players.
Yeah.
And Baker kills them. He should have thrown 7 interceptions today, John. Truly. 7 interceptions in the game today.
Throws a pretty spiral. I was throwing
and I like, Bosa came over and like had some words of encouragement. Kittle said something post game about, Kyle. The one thing with Baker, he's a competitor. Blocked Nick on a run play. He's an NFL player, but he is what I think. Like when we would start talking about Brock, and you get like some Iowa State fans in the chat over the last several months, Brock would throw a pick, and some Iowa State fans would be like, "Oh, there's our guy." I think Baker is kind of what at the beginning of the year I was a little afraid. Like, is this Brock? Can you be a guy without a plus arm and be a gunslinger and not make a ton of mistakes?
It's hard. I would say you probably can't.
Unless you're just mental.
I thought Baker has a good arm, like on the drive throws. Like, to me, he's got a stronger arm than Purdy.
When you say drive throws, you mean like when he's really able to get into it?
Yeah, I'm just saying when his feet are planted and he can just drive like on an in cut, on an out cut, he can drive the ball. He throws a beautiful spiral. He's just, he's been turnover prone in his career. But regardless, like one of the reasons where he fails, right? He'll throw a lot of turnovers. He doesn't give you a lot of wow stuff anymore that Purdy does. Purdy's a better athlete. Purdy back-to-back weeks has hit 2 passes to Kittle and then today to Ayuk on essentially go routes. I know Kittle's technically wasn't because he kind of ran around. That the 49ers literally haven't hit in the Kyle Shanahan era. They never hit that fucking pass. One, they don't throw it that often, but when they do and they get a one-on-one situation, they have never hit that. And they have had teams that, I mean, we're talking a franchise that over the last 5 years have won 6 playoff games, and they can't run that play. Like one of the most basic plays of football, just like the go route down the sideline, or just a sideline pass in one-on-one
over the top sideline ball. Yeah,
he's hit it twice perfectly. The Kittle one was more impressive in the sense that he was like, there were guys right in his face. This one is just pure football. Can you just hit that guy? Hit him fucking in stride. To me, if it's Debo or Kittle, right, they do the Deion Sanders at like the 20-yard line. And Ayuk just walked in the end zone, did a cool little dance.
I thought he also threw a really good. He put a perfect ball on Ayuk earlier in the game that had a defensive holding on it. Jacoby Dean. It was like the second series of the game. Remember, left sideline, Ayuk off his fingertips, but Jacoby Dean got called for a defensive pass interference. But the ball was actually in the perfect spot. So he threw 2 of those balls today.
Yeah,
Darnold did it in one preseason game, but took the Niners a long time. They're not good at it. They're just, as an organization, they don't do it. In camp they don't do it. They just don't do it.
Well, I'll give you a number that I just looked it up because like how many? Because Ayuk's stats are weird. He has these huge impacts on games, but his numbers are like 5 for 75. Right? It's not. He's
5 for.
He had 5 for 150.
I mean, the touchdown's 76, longest in the NFL this year.
But if you watched the game, you'd be like, oh, he had 9 for $140, right? But that's what he feels like. Brandon Ayuk, while only 43 catches on the season, has 830 yards.
Wow.
And to me, one number, when I looked up Purdy stats when the game was over, when it was like 27-14, even though it kind of went back and forth a little bit after that, he was 19 of 22. And this is the other number that always stands out for Purdy. He's never, you look at some of these quarterbacks throughout the day, if you're just watching football, it's like 7 yards an attempt, 6 yards attempt. When they're really shitty and everyone's making fun of, like when I can tell people are making fun of a quarterback, like a Zach Wilson or a Carr, it'll be like 4 yards an attempt. When I screenshotted 19 and 22, it was 14 and a half yards an attempt. Every single game is high. And that's where, I mean, Brandon Ayuk's going to probably end the season if he stays healthy, 75 catches, but he's going to have like 1,400 yards. And a lot of guys with 1,400 yards, I would imagine usually like 93 catches. And one thing Ayuk right now is when the ball leaves his hand and he's going deep to Ayuk, throwing to Ayuk, it is typically like 15 to 20-yard plays. It's explosive first downs. That, to me, the offense, because McCaffrey early on in this game looked just freaking awesome. It's like they added Christian McCaffrey, who's still a star, and they upgraded a quarterback so much. No wonder their team is so much more explosive. Like they had Kittle and Debo before. Like they've had Trent Williams for a while. But now they have a good quarterback, and they have Christian McCaffrey. They're just dramatically better on offense, right? When everyone's on the field. It's unstoppable.
It ended up at 13.3.
That's high.
Yards per attempt. This is from PFF, Jeff Deeney, who I know always feeds Papa good stats. Jacksonville was 11.4. Cincy was 11.8. Those are all high numbers.
Hell yeah. Because I saw Todd Bowles, one of his quotes was in his post-game press conference was like, I thought we like played our ass off. And I agree. I thought they came to play hard. Like they were, this wasn't just, you got a team that's probably not going to make the playoffs start laying down. Like that team fought.
They got multiple, to your point, like they got multiple, you just look up, they got multiple good players, good weapons on offense. Like guys, you get the ball in their hands, they can make a play.
Yeah. Baker battles, like they said.
Baker battles. Yeah, he'll help you out too, but he battles.
And to me, Purdy is just, since that bye week, these last 2 weeks is just, this isn't real football, right? Going 19 of 22 during stretches of games is just not normal for 315 yards.
Yeah.
He ended up with like 330.
330.
Whatever. Okay. But this is where I can live with a pick, ideally not in the last 5 minutes of a tie game, but you can throw a pick in the second quarter if you're giving me 3 or 4 touchdowns.
Right.
Like, welcome to fucking Brett Favre's career. Rodgers is a bad example because he didn't throw picks. But a lot of Peyton Manning threw picks. Like you can throw picks. Give the touchdowns. It's what we didn't get with Jimmy. You never got the balancing act. What's this guy going to end up with right now? 32 touchdown passes? Probably not because they'll run the ball.
Well,
Kyle will throw it with him, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Seattle lost, but you're still going to play games where you're going to have to make plays to win. I think, a couple
Niners are back in first place.
Niners are back in first place. Rams helped out, missed a 55-yard field goal. The Seahawks. Drew Lock got to play a little bit through a pick. 21-25. I don't know how often that ends up in 333. Sometimes 21-25. Like, you're not, to your point, you're not throwing it 13 yards per attempt. So you get 21-25, it's gonna be like 250, right?
I honestly, Derek and Alex, it felt like had a lot of like 20 of 27s, 21 of 26 for $188, right? And they would win the game and they'd be efficient. And they got when Derek was playing well, Alex, a lot of his career once he got with Andy, because the knock on them is like, well, they're not doing anything down the field. That is not Purdy's problem at all. And I think I think going through some of that shit that he went through can only help you. Yeah. Right, making the poor decisions, screwing up. I was watching Michigan yesterday, JJ McCarthy, who's kind of coming back to earth, doesn't look that good. Mm-hmm. How do you get any better as a player when you're just constantly kicking the shit at everybody? How can you get prepared for tight games, right? And I think, and even Fred said this weeks ago, like, sometimes it's good to kind of get in the ugly, right? Because this is not normal. Even today, it would have been one thing to be a 40-10, but you had to work a little bit. It was a healthy work, right? Now, you lost a player, which sucks, but you got tested. Like, guys had to get some legit action on both sides of the ball. Christian, you saw how mad he was when he got stuff. Like, it was never, I didn't feel in the balance, but I kept doing the math in my head. Well, it's not like totally over yet. Right?
Yeah. Well, I think what you're describing is like Dallas. Like, I was watching Dallas today thinking they're kind of like a top-end college football team.
I didn't watch one
Panthers in front of them. Oh, they're going to treat them like Georgia State. Like, you give them the Giants, they're going to kick their ass, right? But to your point, like, that's not, and you get credit for that too. Like, you love the Niners.
It's why Dallas got credit in the loss to the Eagles, right? It's like, God, they never play that close.
Yeah.
They never look that good in a loss.
But they're not good at we've seen it repeatedly. They're not good at the end of those games. They don't manage the clock well. They don't make plays in the right spots. They don't play button-down football, but they will be they are every year. You look up, you're like, top 5 team. They go into the CFP this year, and then they get to they're kind of like Michigan. Maybe we'll find out, but it feels like maybe they're a little like Michigan, the old Dallas Cowboys. I think there's some similarities, big games between McCarthy and Harbaugh. Rather have Jim, but I think there's something there. What do you think? The game started like to what you said about Brock and the struggles. I think it was just as much about like how I feel about him than it was even for him. Like, he came out unfazed. I heard Kawakami ask this question of Kyle Sunday post game, and we've talked about it a lot. Like, how would he come out of the bye week after he had those back-to-back bad late game situations? And he came out unfazed, just chucking the ball. And I thought again today, the first drive, it's going to get tipped sometimes. Maybe it'll get picked occasionally, but his like middle of the field over the linebacker throw is it's like his bread and butter. He's really good at that. Kyle gets some wide open guys plenty, but he is really good at that throw. And I mean, you watch college football, like, you don't see that throw a lot. And even in the NFL, it's just it's a dangerous throw because you got to drop it in front and behind. And he throws that ball really well. He just throws that ball really well. So,
I mean, layering the ball, I'd say, is a huge point of emphasis for him, right? Of success, the layered throw.
Would you agree? It's just it's not a typical. Most guys don't make it look as consistently good as he does.
Well, the good guys do, right?
Yeah, the good guys,
the high end players do, yes. And I'd say the guys that fail, right? I mean, the high picks that fail, Trey Lance, Mitch Trubisky, like they can't make that throw.
Zach Wilson,
which in fairness is a very, very difficult throw to make. And I would say the middle of the road guys. I think I read this one time in one of Sando's quarterback articles. That's the thing with like Dak. And when Jimmy was good and when Carr was good and Cousins, they make it a higher percentage than all the other guys, but they don't make it at the rate in which the other guys make it at the high end. But that, to me, that layered throw between defenders over the top of guys, it's like a touch long pass. It's very, very difficult, but that is the NFL. And that at the highest level, like, you have to be able to make it. Not everything is just I'll just throw a jump ball to George Kittle and he'll bail me out, right?
Right.
There's a touch. Even it's some of his completions are when he scrambles and dumps it to a wide open guy. It's a good play, but it's an easy throw in the NFL level for good players, right? Like that top 15 guy, if they're in the position where the guys are going to hit that 99% of the time, right? From Dak to Mahomes.
I don't want to, dig up old skeletons, John, but it's part of what stood out, I thought, about Trey Lance in camp, right? Is that he wasn't making just that throw that gets put on a platter for you.
But he doesn't. Like that's his limit. Like he's not an accurate guy. He doesn't have touch. That's the knock on him. He doesn't have touch. Zach Wilson, no touch. Mitch Trubisky, no touch. Like no touch. Like you can't play in the NFL. Like this Kaepernick, remember, didn't have touch.
Yeah.
Cam struggled with no touch, but he was way better than all those guys, right, over the course of his career. And he could hit so many big passes. Like Colin early in his career could get away with the no touch because he was such an explosive passer down the field and as a runner. And once the running element left, like that was the thing with Trey Lance, like there was no running element, right? His runs, he wasn't a very fluid runner. So it's like, wait, you have no touch and you're not, Kaepernick or Cam Newton? Like what are we doing here? And that's with Purdy. He just has a very good feel for what he is, like just his skill set. And that's a huge part of being a good athlete, right? Whatever pro sport you're in, like knowing what you do well. Most guys aren't like fucking Ken Griffey Jr. or Patrick Mahomes, where it's like, I can do everything. Like usually people have some limitations, but you just kind of have to figure it out. Like ultimately Brock, you notice like when he scrambles, and to me, this is a good trait. He doesn't really scramble to run. He scrambles to kind of keep his eyes up. And they showed him a couple times today, eyes up to throw. Russell had that forever. Back when Deshaun was with the Houston Texans and with Clemson, he was really good at that, like moving the eyes up to throw and make an explosive play. How many explosive plays happen when you scramble outside the tackle box with Josh Allen, Mahomes, Russell for his whole career, Deshaun when he became a star? That is Rodgers. That's when I eviscerate you, right? And that some guys get out there and they either short circuit or they never even get out there, and he's natural at that, like the instinctive level.
Yeah. I thought his best one today, I mentioned several throws, but two more to mention. And one was what you're describing. The other thing he's proving to be really good consistently at, right, is the step up in the pocket. What just happened?
Josh Dobbs just made an incredible play.
Oh, I
this
rewound.
Guy's having like the
Browns
career renaissance. Insane.
It's really crazy. The thing that Brock is like one of the ones you're talking about today, I think, steps up and he does that thing really well where he steps up and moves to his right and then throws on the run. And he hit Debo in the second half, of the second possession of the second half. He hit Debo on one of those, steps up, moves to his right on the run. He loves kind of throwing like a shortstop, doesn't he? Kind of on the run, one leg, kind of front leg kicked out. And then the other throw on the eyes up play there was a throw to Ayuk on the right hash where Feliciano, do you remember this play? Gets trucked. Vita Vea Feliciano's on his back and Vita Vea is at Brock Purdy's feet in half a second. And Brock kind of similar to when he had to pump and hit Kittle last week. He kind of felt it, but kept his eyes up and delivered the ball to Ayuk. It's just, it's complete.
Well, I'll give you a good example of like Jimmy Garoppolo when the 49ers had really good teams. How often did he kind of end up sometimes in a position and then miss the guy behind or skip the ball to him?
Back footed.
But not even the pocket one where he back foots it, where he kind of scrambles like, oh, Jimmy's kind of making a play. And then the ball doesn't end up. You're like, God was open.
Was it the Packer game? What was the game? What was the playoff game? He rolled right and almost ended the season. Do you remember that?
Well, he did it against the Cowboys. I remember.
It was the Dallas.
In Dallas. They were killing him and threw a pick six, and they got back in the game.
That's right.
He did that again in the Green Bay playoff game, if you remember. They were driving, I think, at the end of the half, and he threw a pick six. Or not a pick six, but the guy almost took it to six. Luckily, they made the tackle, and then he missed the field goal, I think.
I think the Dallas one got dropped, right?
I thought that Dallas had a pick six. He basically threw a pick six against Green Bay, but the guy got tackled toward the red zone, and then they ended up missing a field goal to go into halftime. Kind of got saved, but that was
an all-time should not have won the game.
Oh,
remember Rodgers missed the wide open running back down the right sideline.
I'd say it's an all-time. If you're Green Bay, that's the worst loss of your career. I think that's the worst loss of like a Hall of Fame career I've ever seen. Peyton Manning had some bad ones, but that was They're clearly better. They don't even have a quarterback who's functional. That's insane, honestly, that's crazy. R.I.P. Hufanga, whose life's not over, but his season looks to be.
Daniel says, wasn't a pick six, was an immediate score after the pick. I was at that game. Packer game was a drop from Alexander, 23.
But do you remember they were driving and he threw a pick?
Yeah.
In the end zone, and I thought he took it back pretty far, but I could be wrong. I'm getting some of his picks.
Talking about the Dallas.
I'm talking about the Green Bay Cold game. Jimmy threw a bad red zone, a baby zone pick.
Right corner, maybe?
I think right corner, yeah.
Traumatized.
And then when Jimmy would make that move, you would lose faith in it. Where when Purdy makes that move, I'm not able to watch as many Warriors games, but obviously for 8 years, when Clay got the ball and shot it, you're like, bucket, wet, swish. You definitely do not do that anymore.
Yeah.
Where you change as you watch a guy succeed or fail. It's no different like a hitter, like Derek Jeter in his prime coming up. You're like, he's going to get hit in a big spot. And you know guys you root for, like, this guy's getting out. Like Aaron Judge or Giancarlo's come up. You're like, okay. Right, in a big spot, especially Giancarlo.
Well, the Giancarlo, did you see what Cashman said the other day? Basically, like, was Giancarlo going to get hurt this year? Yes, he's going to get hurt this year. He's going to miss some, basically, like, yeah, like that's predictable.
You see then his agent said that's going to, like, got pissed off, and then they asked Brian Cashman if that's going to hurt their pursuit of this, like, Asian superstar. He's like, no. He's like, this agent, shut up. Your guy gets hurt all the time. Pay you a lot of money.
What are we pretending?
But ultimately, like, Purdy's good. There's just no doubt about it. He's playing really, really good. He's like a high-end player. Yes. He's a high-end player.
He's a high-end player. A+ grade today.
High-end player.
You mentioned Hufanga. Let's talk about that. If you listen to this Monday, you may already know Shanahan did say post-game it's probably an ACL. Injured, non-contact injury during the game. Jair Brown came in and got roasted in his first appearance. Then got a PBU on Mike Evans in the end zone, a PBU on Kate Otten in the end zone, and an interception in the end zone. But
PBU, I mean, he was trailing. Ball was late. Just kind of went up. Could have,
and then Otten's was bobbled. Then he got there. But
I'll give him a pass on the first play that he got smoked and it was a PI. He was just flat-footed. The guy ran right by him. Coming in fourth quarter, tough spot. Everyone's loose.
Yeah, but
tough spot. Just, I mean, he's replacing it all. The guy was a second-team All-Pro last year. The guy's really one of their better players
at a really deep position, right? The reason Jair Brown hasn't played a lot is because it's a deep position for them. Gibson, Odom, Hufanga, safety. I looked before the game. Chase Young has more 49er snaps than Jair Brown does this year. He has barely played. He had 32 snaps coming into the game. Like, it's nothing. And, I don't, maybe somebody, I guess, hearing that would argue you would have liked to get him more snaps in preparation for the possibility that something like this happens, but they're so deep at that position, it's hard. But it seems like now they're going to go from a guy they drafted to a guy they drafted. I'm obviously not trying to save their season, but it's gonna be a big part of how good this defense is. Can Jair Brown kind of step in and pick up where Hufanga left off? Not that Hufanga he didn't feel like he was playing as well this year. I don't know.
He's not. I mean, coverage is never. The more and more you play, they're going to find your limitation. It wasn't a knock on him in the draft. He's never going to be able to man up and just run around and chase a slot receiver, a tight end. Like, that's going to be a limitation. He's going to have to beat him with instincts and be in the right position. The more an offensive coordinator gets film on you, I'm going to find a way to get you in space. I can't just play you around the line of scrimmage 24/7, 365 in the modern day NFL, right? In the 80s, you get away with it. Pete Carroll got away with it a lot with Cam Chancellor. I would say the 49ers, some of those teams with Whitner and Goldson, the game was a lot different. Like, the offenses you were playing were a lot different. It is more difficult when teams are spreading it. Like, you watch the Bucs today, they're just running 3, 4, 5 wide. I mean, they're just slinging it around. You just got to play in space. What was the play he got injured on? Just a play in space, one-on-one. That's kind of the NFL, which he's good at. He's a great tackler. But coverage is always, I don't want to say it's going to be his bugaboo, but it's going to be if you and I are on another team and we're playing the Niners, that is a weakness for the 49ers, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think you saw some of the weaknesses just in general in their secondary. Hufanga, not a great cover guy. Charvarius is much better. He would much rather have you just go deep and he can just be on top of you than you run routes that have a lot of movement, right? Out routes, in routes, like where I get a shiftier guy. Just don't give me Mike Evans running out route. Just give me Mike Evans one-on-one in space and let me use my big body and my speed, right? He's Tyreek Hill one-on-one with Charvarius, who's the Niners' clear best corner. Those type players are going to be difficult for them to handle, right? But A.J. Brown is going to be difficult, but at least like, okay, just run a go route. We'll just man up. We'll play basketball, right? Their secondary is just going to be, I mean, I thought Fred Warner today looked like fucking Ray Lewis. I mean, the guy was everywhere.
Greenlaw looked better, I thought, today too.
Oh, how about the play late in the game where dude caught him on the sideline? He hit him so hard. The dude flew past like the first two lines of people standing on the Bucs sideline. And Greenlaw just kind of looked at him for a second and just like walked back to the huddle. He hit him so hard. Greenlaw looked much more fluid today than he has in previous weeks. But I mean, Fred was on a mission today. I mean, kicking ass and taking names. Let's face it. Obviously, they had Sherman, who was a better player than Ward. But similar, like they just had one corner they could rely on, a lot of other corners, but that front dominated. And I think that's how they're going to ebb and flow. When the defensive line dominates, when Fred's dominating, and their offense is good, they got a chance to beat anybody on any given day. And, you know, it sucks, but they never have to play Joe Burrow again. Or Cousins.
Oh, yeah.
Well, might be their first-round playoff matchup.
Tony said, call Kwaski Tart.
I don't think that ship sailed. Something weird happened there, didn't
it? Yeah. I also think they drafted a safety with pick 87. That's what Jair Brown is. He doesn't have to be their number one safety. This is why he's here. You don't get the red shirt. According to your plan always. And who knows? Maybe did you say this a few weeks ago or a month ago? Like Jair Brown just might be, is Hufanga getting extended given how expensive this team is? Did you bring that up like last month? Or am I imagining that?
Maybe. Yeah. I think we talked about it, but would they extend him after year 3 or would they just let him play out the 4 years?
Yeah, I just mean like in the big picture, like is it just kind of as good as Hufanga's been? Is that going to be? Are they just hoping to just rotate Jair Brown right in and let Hufanga hit free agency eventually? I don't know, but I thought you brought that up a month or so ago, and they drafted this guy because they think he can be They drafted Hufanga in the 5th round, so they obviously think this guy can be a really good player.
I do think they take a lot of pride. Like, obviously, their general manager is not your typical scout. He's not your typical guy that came up. Well, he's a contract negotiator. He's just former player, loved ball, just got involved, right out of the booth. I mean, even Mike Mayock, literally for a living on TV, did the evaluation of the draft, right? I mean, John's like, I just love ball, man. Elway, just Peters, I want in. It's the least. It definitely used to happen more in like the 70s and 80s in sports. Like that's how guys became GMs in basketball, football, and baseball. They're just former players. Yeah. That is not the case anymore at all. I would say it's actually the opposite of guys like him and Dion. Like that type of stuff just doesn't happen at all because I can't risk in college football or the NFL, whether you're GM, head coach, the amount of money, what's on the line. It's much more like a normal job. Like you kind of have to prove it before I can take a flyer at the rate in which I'm paying you, right? It's much more like you get hired at a company, but you don't become the CEO at a company without having some fucking pelts on the wall. And I wonder if he does feel pretty confident evaluating this position. I mean, Gibson off the scrap heap, what they've done with Hufanga.
Odom.
Obviously, when they drafted Jair Brown, he talked about him pretty highly. Remember, Jair is a pretty productive guy. Talk shit all you want about Penn State on offense. Defense is not their issue, right? Defense, their defensive players, they have an NFL defense.
And he was on, that was the team that mollywopped Utah in the Rose Bowl, right? He was
honestly, if you just give them a normal high-end college offense, they were competitive with Michigan and Ohio State. Their offense is a joke.
I feel like they lead the nation in like blue chip quarterbacks that just fall off the face of the earth.
I swear to God, one of my buddies who works for the Eagles, who went to Penn State and loves the program, like falls like the recruiting. He's like, I'm telling you, man. Because last year, They couldn't wait to get rid of the dude the Packers drafted.
Yeah.
Like, we got this guy. Buzz is, think Josh Allen. And that was the hype on this guy.
Yeah.
And it was like all over the country. It wasn't just fans. I think, the people that cover it, from the Joel Klatz and the people around it, were kind of hyping this guy up.
Look at the Heisman odds, it was there.
And he has just crumbled like a cookie.
Drew Aller. They fired their offensive coordinator this year.
They scored like 20 points this week against Rutgers. I think they won the game like 20-6.
How about Northwestern being like good at football this year, by the way?
Didn't they hire the interim?
They did. They hired the guy that showed up like 3 weeks before they fired everybody.
Yeah, so listen, you get pedigree guys, who are really productive in college. Like, ultimately, that was Hufanga. Now, unlike Jair, who was on good team at Penn State, Hufanga was on shitty team. But you watched USC, obviously Drake Jackson kind of blended in. He did not. Like, it wasn't just traits. It was this guy made plays, and this guy made plays. And to me, there's always something to production with evaluating college guys. Like, do you actually make a lot of plays? Or am I just doing the bulky? Like, bulky took the dude from Georgia. The one guy in Georgia's defense who didn't do anything. It's like, just take Aiden Hutchinson. He's like, too white. Bulky's like, I can't risk it. I don't want a high floor guy. And it's like, you think he'd want that one over?
Yeah.
I think sometimes just take the productive guy. Don't try to overthink it. And I get why you do it, right? Because sometimes it hits. You look like a fucking genius, but it misses way more. Just take productive players. Are usually productive in the pros, right? I mean, this just isn't that complicated of a strategy. And
especially when they measure and test. Right.
Remember the knock on this guy, right, ran a little slower, I think. But again, how many 4.4? There aren't many Earl Thomas.
That guy goes in the top
and he got him in the third round.
Yeah, that guy you're talking about goes in the top 20, right?
Because Jair Brown was a third round pick, right? I mean, he's
pick 87.
It wasn't like they liked this guy. And I think this is the NFL, though, guy. Like, clearly very lucky. This is not. If I told you they lost a player to an ACL before the game started, your heart would drop, because you're like, oh my God, is it? You're thinking, is it 6 or 7 guys, including the quarterback? This sucks. And he's a really, really good player. But if you took all your really, really good players who are captains, and this is the shitty part about the NFL, if I told you all their good players, you might pick him first, right? You wouldn't pick Trent. You wouldn't pick Fred. You wouldn't pick Debo. You wouldn't pick Ayuk. You wouldn't pick Purdy.
Mooney.
You wouldn't pick Mooney Ward for sure. You wouldn't pick Hargrave or Chase Young. Like,
it is in there.
It sucks. I hate doing this.
I know. They only have one position of depth in their secondary, and it is safety, right?
They do have a lot of corners, it feels like. I don't know if they're good.
A lot and depth are two different things, but Jason Verrett in the building.
Is he?
They worked him out. I think they signed him to the practice squad. So.
Was that why some of the guys were tweeting about it?
Yeah. A couple of super chats to hit here. Brian says, Brock was Purdy today, and it was almost boring. Like, his efficiency's on another level. And Dylan says, why is Shanahan taking the ball out of Purdy's hands to put it away in the fourth quarter? Those runs on 1st and 10 against loaded fronts were maddening. To me, when you're up 2 scores, I don't know if you saw the end of the Oregon State-Washington game. Oregon State. Did you watch that game at all on Saturday?
Yeah.
Washington was up on them. They come back. Michael Penix throws on 3rd and 3 to ice the game. It was a 1-score game. Like, I got no problem running Christian McCaffrey into a pile of guys when you're just trying to end the game. I know they didn't do it as well as they would have wanted. But when you're up 2 scores, you don't really have to go try and make plays. You're just in clock bleed mode. What do you think? That's my opinion.
Yeah. You're going to naturally get a little conservative in a situation. Would not have liked it up 6, right? If it's 20-14, I think you got to keep your foot on the pedal. 27-14, is Baker scoring multiple times against you? They're not really a quick strike offense. You can lean conservative against individual opponents. I don't think you could take that mindset. Like, if you're playing the Eagles and the score's the same way, I think you go for kill shots. You agree that, like, to me, your opponent determines if you're playing the Chiefs, if you're playing where this to me was, let's face it, kind of was boring because you never felt like the game was in doubt. Like, they're not losing to the Buccaneers. And listen, they've had games where you're like, this is kind of weird. I never felt that at all from after the first drive. Even though, like, the more and more the game went, because you can watch the Bucs play the Saints or whoever, and you go, God, I kind of like them. But when you watch them play the Niners and you really get to see player for player, I came away as the game went on respecting. We've talked about this earlier. Just this team has a lot of talent. Now, I don't know this offseason, you kind of blow it up. Do you just kind of reset it? Can you try to like Band-Aid it and try to improve the quarterback, maybe move one of the guys? But this is not some team it's not the Carolina Panthers, right? This is not some team that you just go, even the Bears, devoid of a lot of players. And I got no issue playing Baker Mayfield, who is kind of one of your classic, like, this guy's not beating the 49ers. Not when he's not even looking that good. And maybe a big part of that is the 49ers making him not look that good. I mean, there was one play where they hit a third down late in the game, like on Mike Evans on that crossing route. Mike got to the sideline. It looked like he was about to pass out of exhaustion. It showed his face. He's like, I don't know if he was angry or just couldn't get his breath.
I mean, Baker threw it like almost 50 times today, so it's probably a lot of routes for Mike.
Yeah, it is true.
And you're down, you're running like you're not, these aren't red zone like 5-yard routes. You're trying to get to the sticks on
this franchise. Remember last year they were the worst running franchise in the history of the league. This franchise is just like giving up on the run game. We'll just pass it unlimited times.
Yeah,
I think the playoff game against the Cowboys, Brady threw it like 75 times.
Yeah, maybe remember. Yeah, it was the lowest yards per game for a playoff team ever. I think is what it was like 60
on the rush
yards. Yeah,
yeah.
McCaffrey, by the way, set an NFL record today, John, passed Roger Craig's career reception number for a running back. That's pretty crazy at this point in somebody's career to set any sort of career record when you're, in theory, hopeful like halfway through your career, right?
Well, think about a lot of the guys, famous players that young kids would know on video games that get traded. We've seen a lot of them over the last, 5 years, from A.J. Brown to Devontae to Tyreek to Khalil Mack to Jalen Ramsey, star players that just are star players that get traded. This was a player who, let's face it, brand, I don't want to say was dead, but he was just a little out of sight, out of mind. He was not one of the major players in the NFL in the sense of when you talked about star players, his name didn't come up. And this trade
non-fantasy.
Exactly, like nerdy fantasy, like just bullshitting out of bar about elite dudes, right? This guy has immediately gone to the 49ers and become best running back in the NFL, one of the best players in the NFL, and just
mainstream
a superstar.
Mainstream star. I watched the game last week. Alyssa said to me, she's like, do you think she's like, Christian McCaffrey's probably like a top 5 most exciting player to watch, right? I was like, let's make it like, it's good. Like, let's think about it, but it's, the short answer is yes. He is a top 5 most exciting player to watch. Now we could make the non-quarterback, right? We could make the list and you could easily make a list without him. But that's just what people who watch football casually think. This is one of the most exciting players to watch.
Well, if you're just watching that game, the first couple of drives, how does it not creep into your mind? God, this guy is sweet. Making runs, bouncing off guys, bouncing runs, catching the ball. He's just electric. He's an electric factory with the ball in his hands. He's just an elite player. And he was with Carolina. Injuries derailed that. But ultimately, you're the Carolina Panthers, a brand. The moment you don't have superstar Cam Newton or competing in the playoffs, no one gives a flying fuck about you. And I'm not trying to diminish shittier brands, but your margin for error as a bad brand is much smaller than the big boys. It just is.
And brand or no brand, you don't play in meaningful games. It doesn't, you just don't.
And well, that's part of it. You don't get the benefit of the doubt, right? No. If you're on a bigger brand and your team's not as good, you still get some of those meaningful games. That is, to me,
your moments,
the Cowboys, the Jets. They're irrelevant.
Didn't matter. Catching at the Rams last year, incredible.
Irrelevant.
I misheard the record. So thank you for the correction here on the chat. First, most catches by a receiver through his first 7 by a running back. Most catches by a running back through his first 7 seasons. Okay.
Yeah.
We all know Jerry Rice has the record for most catches by a running back in a career, John.
Yeah. Again, someone blasted us on social media. Okay. I immediately asked his age. He said 45. And that's my point. Like, there's not going to be anyone 29 pissed off. So everyone older, like you're 45, you're 6-7 years older than me. That's 6+ years of watching Jerry in like the late 80s, right? I mean, he's I'm 39 years old. And there's a level of like, I started really picking up Jerry in like 92, 93 Well, Jerry came in the league at 84, right? So there's an element that you have 6 years. The guy 30 years old. Remember when he played with Tim Brown on the Raiders and T.O. stole all his catches? Like there's a generational level of when records, everyone, the Cal Ripken, I don't even care if you don't even like baseball. It's just like a famous record, or Wilt Chamberlain, 100 points. Football records are they're just completely irrelevant. That's why it's like for the first 7 years for a running back, no one even knows these things because ultimately they don't matter. You just know Roger Craig, Christian McCaffrey, Marshall Faulk. You're like LaDainian Tomlinson, incredible pass catching running back, some of the best of all time. That's all that matters. How many? No one knows. It's like at any moment, if you need them, they catch you 80 balls on a given year, right? They can just play receiver for a game. That's the way you talk about it, not like this guy in his best year hit 397, right? You don't speak about it like that. Even touchdowns, right? Like his best year he had, unless you bring up their Wikipedia page, you just go, God, this guy scored a lot of touchdowns. You don't know, like on this given year, he had 17. This given year, he had 9. Like all these players, like how many touchdowns they have this year. Like Justin Jefferson, I know he scores a lot. How many has he scored on a given year? Or Travis Kelce. And like George Kittle, for example. You go, yeah, I bet he averages throughout his career probably like 4 touchdowns a year. Or, you wouldn't say like 10 touchdowns. You just you can kind of gauge it.
Right.
But that's how football kind of works. Like
I'd
Purdy
guess 6, but let's look. Marshall Faulk has the record, by the way.
I saw someone tweet out that however many touchdowns he has with Purdy is how many he had through the first like 70 games of his career, which is clear. He's got a lot of touchdowns this last year and a half.
He had one today. This has him at 4, so I'm guessing he has 5. 36. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 divided by 7. 5.1. He had 11 last year, which was by far a career high.
And he definitely got a lot once Brock came in.
Yeah. Yep. I
think that's what makes the NFL the easiest to talk about, because you don't need numbers really for anything, but you can use them for your argument. Like when Richard Sherman goes, we're the greatest scoring defense of all time. No one knows, 12.7 they average over 4 years. You just know it's really hard to score touchdowns on them, right?
He's not talking about the stat, right? He's not talking about the number. Yeah.
He's just like, when you played us, you guys were fucking going to get lucky to get 250 yards of total offense.
You were afraid.
Yeah.
Which is part of the stat, right? Like,
and that's part of talking about football that I think it's very difficult. And listen, I could be wrong, but why the analytical movement, I think why baseball, it's not a podcast radio sport anymore in terms of like talking about it. I think even basketball, if I ever listen to a basketball podcast and they get you just lose me. Like, it just talk about the play, just talk about what you see or what's going on. And football is just the easiest too, while easily using the stat. Like, we're never going to argue, touchdowns don't even matter or yards per catch don't matter. It's like everything's always going to kind of matter. It's pretty black and white what matters and what doesn't. And it's like is he good or not? And you kind of argue it because there's a lot of gray area.
Yeah. I've always thought this. I think you're so right. Analytics ruined sports talk in a way. I know how that sounds. Like, you have to use. Why would you not use the numbers that help you make better decisions? Of course, you do and you should. But the majority of people who casually follow sports, because sports is mostly followed like, when I say casual, I mean like super casually, not. But most people, like you sell out stadiums and you get 100 million people to watch a game with just the casually engaged people who love talking about sports, but who have other things to do and don't necessarily always know which receiver your team worked out on a Tuesday. If you know that information, you are A, hardcore, awesome, great to have you. B, in the minority of the people that fill a stadium and watch a game, which is fine. You need all types of people, but it's the casual fan that sells out a stadium. And it makes it a little harder to have the conversation in a fun, easy way. I'll tell you, football, of course, as you know, uses them. I met Joey McGuire this week, John, the Texas Tech coach.
I thought you meant the actor.
No, I didn't even think of that. Good call. High school coach for 14 years. Won 3 state titles. Dallas, Fort Worth, like won a bunch of state titles. And I was asking about analytics. And he said, well, every week they get a report. And a lot of teams use like external companies to give them reports.
I think a lot of them subscribe to PFF, give them stuff.
Yeah, PFF, but there's actually several. He named the company. I don't remember the name, but there's several companies that will give them game-specific reports. Like, here's the other team's tendencies this week. Here are your tendencies. He said every week on like Wednesday or Thursday, we'll have a meeting with a guy. We'll go through the report and we'll talk about situations that could come up in the game.
Guy on his staff or an external guy?
External guy. Like a guy who runs like a consultant, basically.
Gotcha.
They go. So he said, so last week, and what these guys will do is they'll create reports. So like last week when Penn State had, they didn't go for it on a fourth down, but then they didn't go, like, what was it, 2 weeks ago? They didn't go on like a 4th and 1, but then they went on like a 4th and 5. So like this consultant will also bring to the table like other decisions other teams have made, and they'll kind of go through, like, if you're in this spot, what do you do? Well, last week they played a team whose quarterback got hurt. So he did things. He coached that game away from the analytics. Go for it here. He would normally go for it, but because the backup is playing for the other team, he punted. So he's like, let's make this guy drive the field on us. It's kind of, the weather's bad, whatever. So then they have the follow-up meeting the next week. And the analytics guy says, here were 3 decisions you made. The numbers did not support the decisions you made. You probably should. And he's like, look, I also had to coach the game changed from the numbers we went over on Thursday.
Yeah.
And that's what I had to do. But there is so much that goes into it now. Like I had a referee, I was on the field and I asked him about it. He said, it like enforcing penalties has gotten slower because they got to wait for the team, for their analytics guy to look at the book and tell them, should we accept or decline the penalty? And it has slowed the game down a little bit. Not in any noticeable way, I don't think, but it's just slowed the game down a little bit. But what football has, I'm glad you said that too. I was in the car today. I flipped on the radio. This was like this morning. The Cowboy game. It was like, they're flipping around game to game to game.
Yeah.
The Cowboys game is on. Cowboys are playing the Panthers. The Panthers are not a threat to the Cowboys. And I flipped this thing on, and you would have thought that the Super Bowl was about to kick off. Just listening to the Cowboys radio, right? And the radio guy, Babe Laufenberg, he's like,
he's the Cowboys play-by-play guy?
No, he's the analyst. Like former quarterback. He's like, I can't do his voice, but he's like, I was just on the field before the game, and I am shocked at how tiny the Panthers quarterback is. I was stunned seeing him in person. He was way smaller than I thought. And the crowd's just going crazy. And then the game kicks off, and these guys are it's just once a week you get a war. You get a war once a week.
I had a game. I had on Commanders because as the day went on, some of the games didn't matter. Commanders Giants was pretty entertaining. Tommy DeVito was playing out of his ass.
Yeah.
And every time he'd throw a touchdown and they'd go to his family, the Bears today fucking brought it. And I mean, one huge major separation over the last, obviously football is running circles around every other sport. In college football is in a different tier than the other sports. But tanking is a huge part of basketball. Like literally not trying. No one in football, maybe that final week, if you like start some guy that probably shouldn't start, but every team today, the Packers, who's like, God, the Packers should just lose out, fucking playing their ass off against the Chargers. They won. They beat Brandon Staley and the Chargers, right? You look at the Packers, like, just don't even in basketball, you'd start resting people, you'd mail it in. In baseball, you would have mailed it in like 3 weeks ago. But they were just that game at Lambeau. Even today, the Bucs, now granted, they still have something to play for. You just get every guy's, if you're a paying customer, again, so there are going to be some blowouts and stuff, but if you went to the Lions, Bears, if you went to Packers, Chargers, if you went to the Giants game as a Giants fan, you just go, dude, my guys are trying hard. Really, and you go, as pro sports are getting paid a lot of money. The other sports, like you just go to some of these baseball. I mean, the A's literally haven't tried in like 2 years. They just fucking mailed it in. They do not give a fuck.
Yeah.
They do not care. In basketball, by January 1st, there are going to be 10 teams that don't give a shit.
Well, Jerry DiPoto, the Mariners GM, like right after the season ended, got really criticized because he came out and said at his season-ending press conference, we're just trying to do you just want to give your team a shot, like every 10 years, like 6 of them, you got a shot to win like 85 games or whatever the number was, and like nobody wants to hear that you're just playing the percentages, right? Over the course of a decade. So when I say like the numbers ruined it, let me be clear. Like I am not anti. I use them. Somebody said GFF stock way down. I'm just saying what is the right way to run a team and the right way to make decisions does not always make for the best entertaining product, right? So when people are like, an argument over batting average is stupid. Well, yeah, maybe, but Mike and the Mad Dog just spent 5 hours screaming at each other over it, and people ate it up because it was easy to consume.
I'll give you a good example. Because I thought it was kind of crazy when they did it. And I think the casual person that follows football, that all kind of universally agree, like, you don't need to spend a lot on running backs. When the 49ers gave a second, a third, and a fourth for Christian McCaffrey, which is a much more 1990s, 1980s, 1970 thing to do, I'm like, listen, I've been watching the guy since Stanford. That Iowa game is one of the coolest moments in Rose Bowl history. Christian McCaffrey's career, way better than I ever would have thought. I think you guys are kind of nuts. Like, this is a little Shanahan, emotional, family, Mike pushing you to do it. Thank God they didn't just overthink it with the analytical, this is too much for a running back who makes a lot, and just did, we like this guy, let's go get him, and let's fucking play ball, right? Because that is much more of a gut feel, emotional, and holy cannoli, thank God they did that move. And a lot of times, what would the analytic people take the emotion out of it? Don't get into a bidding war against let them screw up. Let them sell more of their picks. You're trying to wipe them off the map. It'd be one thing if you're bidding against the Eagles, who you're going to play. Get it? You're not really playing against the Rams anymore. They're on a different path than you. But it was like, you know what? Fuck this. I'll overpay for this guy.
And it's going to be worth more to me than he's going to be worth to anybody else, too.
And they nailed that. And let's face it. That is pretty anti-analytics and just anti what we're all kind of taught to do now in 2023. Wait, running back makes a lot of money, injury prone?
There's exceptions to every rule, right? And Christian McCaffrey's an exception.
Yeah, but like you got to be willing to do that sometimes. And coaches are always, for the most part, like, let's face it, all these decisions you get when guys going for it, they feel much more emboldened because the owner gives them the thumbs up. Like, listen to this guy. I'm paying this guy $500,000. He's a freaking genius. I don't even know half the stuff he tells me, but just listen to this guy. I'm cool with it. If you don't get it, like, I know where you're getting the information. It's not most of these guys are inclined to do some of these moves they're doing, but I do appreciate when a coach goes, you know what? Like, let's use Kyle, for example. When McCaffrey was pissed off when he didn't get it, well, starting guard's out, right? His left guard's been injured a little while, Aaron Banks. So he has a backup in there. So, yeah, you got Trent, who, most of the time can take out 3 people. But last time I checked, number 50 ain't lining up over 71. So that's not going to be a wash. So 50's going to win if he's around the ball. And White's was knocked out of the game. But if you just factor in guys are injured, who's playing, like, that has to factor in because the analytics would be like, go for it here. That's always the situation. Well, what if I got 3 backup offensive linemen and my starting running backs on the sideline, right? So I think you got to be careful with how you look at this. And I think Kyle, you don't really know. What's entertaining about watching him is he's not Brandon Staley. He's beholden to the chart. He also can be really conservative, kind of like an old school 90s guy, but he also every once in a while throws a curveball in there. So you kind of never, I'm never confident when something happens. Like when you watch the Chargers, exactly, like, they're going to go for it, right? Or, they punted. Oh, Brandon's become a pussy. He wants to go for it here. He's freaking out. Like, he's afraid. Or Kyle, you have no clue what he's going to do at any moment, which is, I guess, in an element to the 49ers, if you're a fan, makes it a little entertaining because you just don't know what's coming.
Maybe it makes it confusing for the players. I was texting with our boy John Dickinson at the end of the first half. So I'm like, what does Ayuk do when Ayuk didn't go out of bounds? And then the Niners immediately called a timeout. And his take was, I wonder if he knows what, like, he's a smart player. He knows what to do. He knows to go out of bounds. But I wonder if he thought, no, Kyle doesn't want to give the ball back to the other team with any time left. So I better stay in bounds here, take up as much clock as possible. He thought maybe Brandon was just kind of a victim of not knowing exactly what Kyle wanted on this particular drive.
Yeah, they don't have a rhyme or reason with anything they do.
It seems to
that
change.
way.
Yeah. However Kyle's feeling today. So I thought that was a good little. How about, did you see Joey Bosa get carted off today, by the way?
I think they think he tore his Achilles. Oh. One quick bright spot, because this guy's been taking some shrapnel. Moody, just easy day.
Did you see the first extra point though?
Yeah, well, I mean, he just played the wind.
Yeah, well, it was windy there, but that ball was yanked left and then somehow banked, took a hard right turn and split the uprights.
What if you're
And
playing a power cut?
The rest, everything else looked good. So you're right. Good day for old Moody today. Punt cover, something to be aware of.
Yeah.
Why don't?
But again, that guy looked interesting. Why did the Niners never find a little guy like that?
Why don't we have more elite athletic long snappers? You think?
Because that guy ends up playing positions
But
in
like,
college.
there's got to be Oh, okay. In college, yeah, that's a good
and
point.
Then you never train, and it's such a specific thing. I do think it's clearly pretty hard.
Don't you think the move, if like you think you're going to be, the last linebacker on an NFL roster, is to become like, yeah, I play specialty. I'm your long snapper. I'm not just like some guy. I'm your long snapper.
But I can't ever have you in the game, and then if you get hurt on special teams, covering on kickoff, and then I don't.
You don't want your long snapper playing multiple positions, is what you're saying. Yeah.
No, because when you think about when in games, and it doesn't happen very often, when the dude pulls a hamstring in the middle of the game, it's like, well, they're just fucked. Remember, like occasionally they're like,
Raiders,
so and so, Garrett Selleck's their backup long snapper. The ball's flying over guys' heads.
Yeah. Rams beat the Seahawks today, John. You mentioned that. So the Niners go in one game up in the loss column.
Well, that was a good example. I thought Pete got a little conservative at the end. He could have got a little closer. He had some time, and then he just kind of let it run off, and they snapped it, and they went. Was like
Yarder.
Could you have got to 48 yards? Now the game was really lost when it looked like his career was ended when Aaron Donald ripped his arm off. Then he came back, but that stretch of the game when Drew Lock's in there, you suck.
Did you see the game? So I saw you posted you posted like, oh my God, Geno got annihilated on the end zone from behind view. Did you see the view from the side?
That's the only highlight. I just typed it in because I didn't see the play live.
You got to see the one from the side. Geno gets like alley-oop out of the screen. I mean, it's just like
doesn't even look like Donald's moving that fast. And Jesus, he crushed him. They clearly, for him to come back, it's not Purdy or Joe Burrow. They got pretty lucky because at first, when his arm's wrapped, you go, is he out for the year? And if he's out for the year, they would be in major trouble. Like if you told me like they can't win games, right, with Drew Lock, like you start talking, are they a wild card? Could they end up 8-9 or something instead?
Yeah.
I mean, they would have been, they had to see their season flash before their eyes with that injury. And then he can't grip the ball. And you're like, oh my God. Because their backup, he feels like on the low end of backups, doesn't he?
I got a tall Zach Wilson vibe with a little more competitiveness.
It's probably a good comp. Yeah. He's just not very good quarterback. Skills, not very good quarterback. Skills.
A lot of like bench self-confidence on the field. Zach Wilson's got like a lot of bench swag. Field swag, none. You see him
he can sling it.
He can sling it.
Yeah, trip back it up.
Jen on the stream says, my nephew's in high school training to be a long snapper. It's highly specialized. There are crazy camps to get scholarships. There you go. You don't even have to be an Aussie.
Imagine that one guy gets the call from like Ryan Day or Kirby, like, we're going to go with you, Billy.
It's like his list. You like look at the list on 24/7. It's just Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Georgia, Oregon. You're like, oh my God. It's like, wait, he's 6'1", 197? What position?
They're just like 10 guys. And you just part of the team, you blend in, you get to be their buddies, and you just can't screw up.
You cannot screw up.
Because they do not want to think about you. They just want you on the team for a couple years. Snap. Weight room. Better be on time. Yeah. No talking back. Never any opinions.
No controversial social posts.
If you're smart, like you probably could get in pretty good if you're at a big time program, like one of the OCs or DCs that are going places.
Right.
Big picture for your life,
Question for a 5 spot. Thanks to Jair Brown and the defense, the score wasn't as close as it could have been. Any concerns with what you saw today? What was the sack total? I feel like they were getting pressure. Oliver hit him on the. There are a few balls just went popped up because I thought they got pressure. Chase Young looked good.
Had a sack, yeah.
Sack late, but both.
If you're gonna bring in Oliver, Oliver's really more of a linebacker than he is a cover guy because he is a good tackler and he's a good blitzer.
Yeah,
you just can't have him cover people.
But it doesn't feel like he's fast enough to land on the. I mean, that one
He got close.
he got. Yeah, I mean, it's.
Yeah.
I don't know how often it's really landed, but Fred Warner 12 tackles, by the way, with 2 PBUs and a forced fumble on the game.
He was on a mission. It's pretty crazy that the 49ers, it feels like, got 2 of just the most. Like, Purdy had a really good game and it looked sweet. But like when you were watching Cousins and even Burrow, I guess Purdy's game a little bit Burrow, like this is easy for him. The Cousins game was true, like it was just surgical. It was hard too, like what he was doing, some of the plays. I mean, they got 2 guys that played 2 of the better games of the year who both just immediately Achilles, and I don't even know what Joe Burrow official his injury is, beside being out for the season. And those guys are just gone. Luckily, though, like I saw, actually, no, that doesn't. It's the Steelers. They hadn't played the Bengals yet, but Seattle already played the Bengals and lost. Steelers got bailed out because they played the Bengals twice, but
Gotcha.
That doesn't impact the 49ers.
Anything else? Anything else today?
I do think, like, one thing, and I remember Kawakami used to write this, that used to really bother Mark Davis with interim head coaches. And he had 2 guys that clearly the players liked a lot, RIP Tony Sperano, and clearly Rich.
Yeah.
Is they got blown out a couple times, like in really, really ugly games. Like you're allowed to lose. By the time the Raider game kicked off, they were a 14-point underdog. Pretty sure at the beginning of the week it was like 10.5. So money must have been flying in. They covered, by the way, pretty easily. I thought today was like a good day for Antonio Pierce. You know, I do think he keeps doing this and just keeps them around 500, even if they miss the playoffs. Unless Harbaugh like tells him, I want to come, and maybe even gives him a deal, I think Antonio Pierce is going to keep the job. As long as he just keeps the team looking like this.
Yep.
I think he's going to be the head coach for, like, just even if it's like a fake 4-year deal, like a 3-year contract with a 4th-year option. I think he's the lead dog right now.
Helps him too. That's a good take. Helps him too that, you know, he's not an offensive guy. Aiden O'Connell throwing 3 picks, the 1 pick falling down today. It doesn't matter for Antonio Pierce, right? It's irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, he's, end of the day, he is a 4th-round rookie, right?
But I mean,
yeah, he's not the play caller.
No blame. Like, he's a defensive guy. They held the Dolphins to 20 points on the road.
Yeah, they were good. I mean, they definitely showed a lot of fight. I think it can change, right? I mean, they could get blown out a couple times. Today was a classic spot over the years where they lose this game. Even if they end up winning some other games and go 8-9 or 9-8, they lose this game. That spread is covered. And the line doesn't go from 10 to 14 with me and you putting $200 on the Dolphins, right? I mean, there's a lot of real money coming moving that line, because I would say historically in that spot, this franchise loses that game 38-13. And it was tight. They had the ball late with a chance to tie the game. And Jalen Ramsey I thought the Raiders really were pretty impressive today.
John, last we talked, when the Niners 11-point favorites, because it closed at 13.5 from what I'm looking at. And they won by 13.
I thought it was like 10. I thought it was like 10.5 earlier.
Yeah, well, they won by 13, and the line closed at 13.5. I'm just looking for the week. Niners are currently looks like about depends where you look, like a 6.5 or 7-point favorite on Thursday night. Which just, Thursday night road games are weird. So,
would that number, if Geno was 100% healthy and you didn't have to worry about, like, do you wake up, is his arm all swollen? Is that number 5? Are they kind of in the middle? Because to me, if Drew Lock's playing, what's that number?
Bigger.
10?
Yeah, I think this is the Geno number. I think this is the Geno is playing number. You agree with that or no? You think it would?
Yeah, no, yeah. But I think it's I think if Geno was playing and they were just normal, let's say he had never been hurt today and they just win the game, is that number -5? They build in like an extra 1.5, 2 points, and they have no problem if, like, in a couple days it's like Geno's arm is actually all swollen. It's going to be very difficult for him to play. That 6.5 goes to like 12.
Right.
But I wonder if it'd be closer to 5. Maybe you're right. Maybe are they just a touchdown favorite on the road short week? It seems a little crazy. This team does have a lot of good players.
Yeah. What DK finished with today? Every time I looked up, it felt like he was making a play.
I think Kenneth Walker got knocked out of the game. Jamal Adams was on the sideline with a knee injury with the cutoffs. He fucking looks like a D lineman, not a safety.
DK was 5 for 94 and a touchdown. Okay.
They did have their moment. They were definitely in first place after the Niners lost the 3 games. But that did shift pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that shifted very, very quickly. The Niners got their swag back fast. And now Seattle, you lose this game, the division would basically be over. Now the Niners still play the Eagles. They still play the Ravens, so they could get some L's. But as we see with Seattle, they are no lock. You just give them a competitive team. Like, what are the Rams when healthy? Probably more a 7-10 team, right? But that's a 7-10 team can beat anyone off a bye. Like the Seattle can just lose that game.
It's 46 degrees. That's the high on Thursday in Seattle. We've had some rain on the West Coast. Doesn't look like any's in the forecast for this week, but a little on Tuesday in Seattle. But just, I know this version of these Niners have not had a problem with Geno's Seahawks, but
it's a massive game from a lot of different angles. You can knock them out. You're going to have multiple game separation. Your divisional record, right? You'll still be undefeated in the division. You have the short bye week against Philly, Philly plays tomorrow, which is going to be a very hard game.
City.
And then Philly plays again when? Sunday, right? So
Buffalo.
So you get they can play the Chiefs and the Buffalo while you win this game on the road. All of a sudden you get that mini bye week. Pretty big advantage for the Niners going in that Eagle game, assuming they win and assuming
if they win.
They don't have a major injuries.
Right.
Because if they don't, you're right. If they lose, even the extra bye week, the pressure on that game is immense. You win, whether you win by 1 point or 50, and you're pretty healthy coming out, I'd say you're kind of in the driver's seat against Philly when you factor in they're fucking playing the Chiefs and the Bills in a 6-day stretch. Kansas City's tomorrow's in Kansas City.
It is.
And this is not the Kansas City team that scores 100 points. This is actually much more of like an old school physical. That game's going to be a lot of kidney shots going on if it was a boxing match.
Game. Eagles plus 2.5. I kind of like Philly, but we'll see.
I think it's one of the home arenas or stadiums in the NFL that still has like the college, like you're coming into a fucking Hornets. That place is going to be lit tomorrow.
Yeah.
Lit. When's the last time they don't even get, it's fun, but it doesn't feel as big as often when you get really good. And there's like the Patriots in mid-dynasty. You get to like, this matters.
You're saying the Chiefs, like to really get up.
To the crowd. Like I just think that place is going to be going bananas.
Yeah.
And if you're a player, it's the crowd just naturally, it's a big game that way. I bet there's a buzz in that city tomorrow for that game. And you don't get as many of those once you just kicking the shit out of everybody. Even though the games actually technically are a lot closer right now than they used to be.
Yeah, but you just know you got the best quarterback. You got one of the best coaches. You're going to the playoffs. You're going to be a 1 or 2 or 3 seed. And, you're not that concerned. You don't have you're not afraid.
Well, the other thing, you start looking around, you're like, well, Deshaun Watson's out. Aaron Rodgers is out. Joe Burrow's out.
Yeah, you
Josh Allen and that Bills team's beating you. Who do I got to beat? The Ravens?
You become like an NBA team. Like you just kind of, you turn it on late. And we'll turn it on in the postseason.
Who's beating us? The Ravens would be the only team. And then you just say out loud, like, wait, Lamar Jackson coming to Kansas City and beat us? That would really happen?
I'm a great playoff quarterback. He isn't.
Tomorrow's that's a good Monday Night Football game.
Schefter reports the Browns are signing
Joe Flacco. Only know that because someone DM'd me a picture of him on a plane. He was also on the plane or something.
I saw
Or maybe it was just he wasn't on the plane. He was the guy was flying to
Flacco, like getting yeah.
Clearly not in first class either.
Flacco. They gotta send you the jet, man. All right.
Yeah, you can't be sending the Jets for 4
He's their starting quarterback in a week.
What's his name won today?
DTR?
Yeah. 13-10. So I mean,
I every time I look up, Warren Sharp is like debating Kenny Pickett in my time. I'm like, why is anybody arguing about Kenny Pickett?
he's supporting him.
No. So maybe it's just good because Pittsburgh fans want. I can't imagine anybody in Pittsburgh supporting Kenny Pickett. It's not working. It's not going to work.
It's why you don't draft the Mac Jones, the Kenny Pickett's high, because they're, for them to be good, their margin for error is just slim to none. That's why you take Brock Purdy, the last pick in the draft.
Just wait. Just play cool.
Just let it fall to you, baby. Let the chips fall to you.
All right. Anything else? Anything we need to add here? Did I miss any
No.
super chats? I don't think so. All right, everybody. Thanks for hanging with us today. And I'll holler at you soon. Later.